Thank you, Dr. Pettit, faculty, executive board, and graduates. It is a privilege to be back here at Piedmont International University. And the thing that I noticed the most, and something that's made me very proud, is the diversity in these graduates. God bless you for the outreach that you have. Proud to see that tonight. The last thing that you would probably expect from a pastor turned politician is another guarantee or a promise. But tonight I'm going to give you a guarantee and a promise. Just one, though, tonight, no outlines. I'm going to give you a promise of this, that each and every one of you as graduates will face one thing. I promise you that you will face one thing. And that one thing is adversity. Now, I want you to look at adversity, and I'm going to break it down in two categories. The first one is adversity from the world. 1 Peter 5:8, we know the enemy is desiring to seek to and fro, working to sift you, working to destroy God's perfect plan for you this evening. But I'm not going to spend very much time, maybe 10 minutes tonight, but I'm not going to spend any time on point number one, because I know that Piedmont International University has given you all that body armor to quench those fiery darts. You got your helmet and your sword and your spirit, and you're ready to go, okay? From adversity from the enemy, got your center of gravity, you're ready to take that on. I want to talk to you tonight for just a few minutes on the second type of adversity. Not from the world, but from inside the camp, from your friends, from your family, even from the church. People ask me all the time about my background in the church, in the ministry. Listen, Christ gave his life for the church. It's the most beautiful thing in the world, but I can tell you sometimes it's the most painful thing in the world as well. Sometimes I'll get asked, how in the world did you, with no political career, hit the ground running so fast in Washington, D.C.? You and I really know the answer. They don't. But I can tell you this, for those of you who may know, if you can survive a Baptist business meeting, listen, working with Nancy Pelosi is a piece of cake. So, well, maybe that's a little exaggerated. So, I can tell you this without having the time to get into it, and many of you could share the same thing. I know what it's like to be beaten, to be broken, to look up and feel like as you've had no hope. That kind of pain doesn't come from the world. That kind of pain comes from inside the camp. I had the chance to play quarterback in my small high school, and I remember there was this one drill called Bull in the Ring. Now, some of you may have played that or remember that. It's probably not politically correct to do that drill. I was the quarterback. I don't know why I was in the middle of this ring to start with, but the coach thought there was some moral value, I guess, in it. So you're in this circle, and the quarterback or whoever's in the middle of the circle, you're there, and the coach will call a number. Number 32. So number 32 is over here. You've got the ball, and you just smack the guy. You're ready to go. Number 44, he's over here, and you're ready to go. Every now and then, the coach would say, number 30. You thought number 30 was over here, but number 30 was over here. And before you could turn around, right in the ear hole, kabam. Now, what does that matter to this? Well, the toughest kind of pain that you will ever face is when you don't have your center of gravity ready. In those helmets, you get hit in that ear hole, there's a certain ring that stays with you for 2 or 3 plays. I have gone back to the huddle, not able to distinguish my left or right, but just point this way and say, we're running to the right. Now, the problem is that many times we are not ready to face that kind of adversity when it's inside the camp. And it can devastate us. And we can get beaten and bruised, but I will tell you, I can assure you that once you get to that place where you feel like that you have no direction to go, that ground is solid. It is solid because you have the faith in Jesus Christ. But let me tell you that God's best for you is easy to miss sometimes, because we can get distracted by the pain that's created from inside the camp. Kelly Clarkson sang a song maybe 10 or 11 years ago. I think it was the #1 hit. It said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Some of you may remember that song. Some of that may be true, but what doesn't kill you doesn't necessarily make you better, because you have a choice, and sometimes I've seen it make people bitter. What is your choice tonight when you graduates, when you take on that adversity? Is it making you better, or is it making you bitter? Wherever you go into full-time ministry, part-time, bivocational, whether you're a volunteer, whatever your career may be, are you ready? Are you prepared? Is your center of gravity rested in Jesus Christ to take on that adversity? Listen, I'm a small-town preacher's kid, but my parents taught me early on what it meant to serve the King, to be a Lord's disciple, because we're called. In the book of Matthew, it tells us that we have to deny ourselves, take up your cross, and then follow Jesus. The symbolism in a cross is something of shame, of embarrassment, that we're actually asked by the Creator to carry so that others can see Him glorified in our lives. I have been blessed in the United States Congress, there's no doubt about it. I was recently looking in January as we had the different appointments to what committee, and I was named the ranking member on terrorism and counterintelligence. And at our first meeting, I opened up the member booklet before we entered into our classified sessions, and I was flipping through the bios of the first guy on the list, jurisprudence, doctorate from Princeton. Flip the page, next guy, 2 degrees from Harvard. My friend to my right, undergraduate at Notre Dame Law School at SMU. Flip the page and there's me, Piedmont International University. Now, I say that to say, God can take you anywhere when you are allowing Him to lead the path. And that is what He is asking for you this evening, tomorrow, and throughout the rest of your life. In the last 4.5 years, I've had the opportunity to travel to many places in many countries: New Zealand, Australia, Romania, Lithuania. Stood on the line of South Korea and North Korea at the DMZ, and I've looked at the soldiers at North Korea, only 20, 30 feet in front of us. I've worked and been there in a Syrian refugee camp just 15 kilometers below the Syrian border. But there's no place that has moved me that I've traveled than being in Normandy. I had the chance to go out there, and I remember standing and looking at those Star of Davids and those crosses lined perfectly there, standing over the grave of one young man, Jimmy Overcash, a 20-year-old North Carolinian who was willing to pay the ultimate price. We looked out over those hills in the valley as you gaze down from the hill. It's amazing that as you can look out across into the Atlantic Ocean. Some of you, from a historical standpoint, may remember what happened on that June 6, 1944 day. There were 5 beaches that were involved by the Allied forces. Great Britain and Canada, they took 3 beaches. And the 2 beaches where the Germans were dug in, Utah and Omaha, was left for the Americans. So as these young soldiers were put into these boats, more like a shipping container, sometimes for a couple hours in those tumultuous waves, the storm had come in. They began to get seasick, dehydrated, without being too graphic, throwing up on each other. And by the time that those big doors opened, the bullets were already lining up. And the reason why is because the airdrop that day, because of the weather, had missed their support. They had no air support. And as I stood there and I began to talk with the guide, he began to talk about what happened specifically on that day. How these great generals and these military minds had drafted out the perfect plan to take that beach. Yet because of the weather, they had faced unplanned adversity that day. And he said to the 5 or 6 members of Congress that were there that day, he said, he said, this battle wasn't won by generals, colonels. It was won by everyday people, 18 and 19, 20-year-old young men running up that hill, knowing exactly what they might face. So sometimes you may not have the greatest resume, you may not have all the prestige in the world, But let me remind you that God has a specific plan for you this evening. And here's the neat thing. God doesn't call you anywhere where you're exempt from being a light for Jesus Christ. Whether it's Washington, D.C., Winston-Salem, somewhere internationally, wherever it might be. And here's the cool part on this God's journey that we live. We talk about the adversity, we talk about some of this, but here's the promise that we see played out many times in our life. It comes out of Ephesians 3:20. And I love this verse because it talks about how God takes us to places beyond what we could ever hope, what we could ever dream, or what we could ever even imagine. It doesn't make sense to the world, because here we are carrying a cross, yet at the same time God is fulfilling everything and more than we could ever be, because sometimes that vessel has to be broken. In fact, I will tell you today, I am not sure that God can use you to your fullest until you've been completely broken. And if you're willing to take that brokenness and allow God to use it, He will take you across the threshold of something that you can't even imagine. Paul said it best in closing tonight. Wherever you go, whatever you do not grow weary in well-doing, for in due season you will reap if you do not faint. God bless you. Thank you for the opportunity.